Captain Ji-woo Park stood on the bridge of the Taiwan's Dream and watched the stars pass by through the window. His ship had been exploring this region of space for 3 months now. They had found 6 planets that could support human life and 2 asteroid fields rich with minerals. Earth would be pleased with their discoveries. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Kyung-hai at the sensor station. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Ji-woo straighten in his chair. "What kind of strange?" Ji-woo asked. "Multiple ships, sir. At least 30 of them. They just appeared out of nowhere, surrounding us in a perfect sphere formation." Ji-woo felt his stomach drop. Humanity had been exploring space for over 100 years and had never encountered another intelligent species. Until now, the ships were unlike anything in human records. They were massive, each one at least 3 times larger than the Taiwan's Dream. Their hulls seemed to shimmer with colors that hurt to look at directly. Some were shaped like crescents, others like spirals, and a few resembled nothing Ji-woo could describe. "They're hailing us," said Communications Officer Minji. "Put it through," Ji-woo ordered. The screen flickered and showed a creature that made several crew members gasp. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head, and its skin looked like it was made of crystal. When it spoke, the translation came through choppy and mechanical. "Human vessel, you have violated Galactic Council territory. You will cease all operations immediately and prepare to be escorted." Ji-woo cleared his throat. "This is Captain Ji-woo Park of the Earth vessel Taiwan's Dream. We didn't know this territory belonged to anyone. We come in peace and mean no harm." The alien's eyes all focused on him at once. "Ignorance is not an excuse. You have established settlements on 14 worlds within Council jurisdiction. You have mined resources from protected zones. You have ignored all boundary warnings." "What boundary warnings?" "We never received any communications from you," Ji-woo protested. "The beacons have been broadcasting for 6,000 years. That you cannot detect them is your failing, not ours." Ji-woo exchanged glances with Dr. Haijin Choi, the ship's xenobiologist. She looked as confused as he felt. They had never detected any beacons or warnings. "We are willing to negotiate and resolve any misunderstandings," Ji-woo said carefully. "There is nothing to negotiate. Your species will send a delegation to the convergence sphere within 6 standard cycles. There you will answer for your violations before the Galactic Council. Failure to comply will result in containment measures." The screen went dark before Ji-woo could respond. The alien ships remained in position around them, clearly waiting to ensure they left. Back on Earth, the news caused chaos. Every government on the planet held emergency sessions. Military leaders argued for preparing defenses. Scientists wanted to study everything about the aliens. Diplomats scrambled to form a plan for first contact. Admiral Daeun Kong stood in the war room beneath Seoul, looking at holographic displays of every piece of information they had gathered. It wasn't much. The alien ships had escorted the Taiwan's Dream to the edge of their territory and then vanished. They had left no way to communicate and no additional information. "We're going in blind," said Ambassador Ming-Ho Lee. He had been chosen to represent humanity at this Galactic Council meeting. "We don't know their customs, their laws, or what they want from us. We know they think we're criminals," said Daeun grimly. "And that word containment worries me." Dr. Haijin had been analyzing the brief communication over and over. The way they spoke to us, it wasn't like equals meeting equals. It was like a judge speaking to a criminal. "They've already decided we're guilty." Minho rubbed his tired eyes. He was 50 years old and had spent his entire career preparing for first contact with aliens. He had imagined it 1,000 different ways. None of them had been like this. "We need to understand what we're walking into," Minho said. "Haijin, what can you tell me about their behavior?" They're organized, highly organized. That formation of ships was perfect, and they appeared with exact timing. The way that alien spoke suggested a rigid hierarchy. Notice how it didn't introduce itself or ask about us. It simply stated facts and gave orders. So they see themselves as superior to us, Bayon concluded. Most likely, yes. The Soul's Hope was Earth's finest diplomatic vessel. It carried Ambassador Minho Lee and a team of 50 people, diplomats, scientists, soldiers, and support staff. Security Chief Bora Kim commanded a detail of 20 trained fighters. Though everyone hoped they wouldn't be needed. As the ship prepared to depart, Minho stood on Earth and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was a council of aliens who had been watching humanity without making contact. They had let humans spread across dozens of worlds, and then suddenly announced that everything humans had done was illegal. "What do you think they want?" asked Bora. She had come to find him before departure. "I think they want us to submit," Minho said quietly. "I think this whole thing is about showing us our place in their galactic order. And if we refuse, then we'll find out what containment measures means." The Soul's Hope launched 3 days later. As it left Earth's orbit, every person on board knew they might be flying toward war or peace. They carried with them the hopes of billions of humans who waited to learn their place among the stars. Captain Ji Woo watched the departure from his new assignment at Earth's Orbital Defense Station. His discovery had changed everything for humanity. They were no longer alone in the universe. But the first neighbors they had met were not friendly ones. The 6 standard cycles the aliens had given them were almost up. Soon Ambassador Minho Lee would stand before the Galactic Council and learn what they wanted from humanity. Ji Woo hoped his discovery wouldn't be the thing that destroyed his species. The Soul's Hope disappeared into the darkness of space, heading toward a destination that no human had ever seen. Behind it, Earth's military quietly began preparing for the worst. The journey to the Convergence Sphere took 3 weeks through space that belonged to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Minho Lee spent most of his time in the ship's conference room, trying to prepare for something he couldn't fully understand. On the 5th day, they received a visitor. A shuttle approached the Soul's Hope and docked without asking permission. The alien that boarded introduced itself as Mediator Valtherax. It looked like a snake if a snake was 12 feet long, had 4 arms, and could float in the air. "I am here to educate you about council law and proper behavior," Valtherax said through a translator device that hung around what Minho assumed was its neck. "Your species has much to learn." Over the following days, Valtherax taught them about the Galactic Council. The information it provided was not comforting. The Council had existed for over 10,000 years. 12 species formed its leadership, the oldest of which had been traveling through space for 50,000 years. They had created a system to manage all the younger species in the galaxy. "The Council maintains order," Valtherax explained. "Order requires hierarchy. Hierarchy requires that newer species learn their place." "And what place would that be?" asked Minho carefully. "Service, of course. Young species serve old species. This is how it has always been." Scientist Taiyang Han had been recording everything. He was a military strategist who had studied human history extensively. Something about the council system bothered him deeply. "How long does this service period last?" Taiyang asked. "It varies. Some species serve for a few centuries. Others serve for much longer. It depends on how useful they prove to be." Security Chief Bora Kim stood up abruptly. "You're describing slavery." Valtharex's S4 eyes blinked in sequence. "I am describing the natural order of civilization. The wise guide the ignorant. The experienced direct the inexperienced. Your species is barely a century into space travel. You cannot expect equal status with those who have mastered the stars for millennia. That night, Minho gathered his core team in a private room. Taiyang had been analyzing all the data Veltharax had provided, cross-referencing it with their own observations. "I found something disturbing," Taiyang said, pulling up charts and graphs. "Veltharax gave us a list of species that have joined the Council in the last 5,000 years. 47 species total. So what's the problem?" asked Bora. "I asked about species that refused to join. Veltharax said there were 12 such species. But when I asked what happened to them, it got vague. It said they declined, or chose isolation, or faced natural challenges." "Natural challenges," Minho repeated. "That's a diplomatic way of saying something bad happened to them." "Exactly. And here's the thing. I dug deeper into the data they gave us about current council members. Of those 47 species that joined, 23 of them show significant population declines shortly after joining. We're talking about losing 30 to 50% of their people within a generation." The room went silent. "They're not offering us membership," said Dr. Haijin quietly. "They're offering us the choice between submission or destruction." Minho felt cold. "We need to verify this." Over the next week, they tried to gather more information. Veltharax answered their questions, but its answers became more guarded. It stopped volunteering information and started asking why they wanted to know certain things. Ora noticed something else that worried her. The ships escorting them to the convergence sphere were supposed to be ceremonial vessels, according to Veltharax. But Bora had military training, and she knew warships when she saw them. "Those aren't ceremonial," she told Minho privately. "Look at the hull plating. Look at the way they're positioned. They're not escorts. They're guards. We're prisoners being taken to trial. Can we turn back?" Minho asked. "Not without a fight. And we'd lose. They have 30 ships. We have 1. Minho made the hardest decision of his life. He sent a coded message back to Earth. The message was simple, not a negotiation. "Prepare for worst." On Earth, Admiral Daeun Kong received the message, and his blood ran cold. He had suspected this might happen. Humanity had been too comfortable thinking they were alone in the universe. They had spread out carelessly, taking whatever they wanted. Now they were about to pay the price. Baeyun began moving pieces on a chessboard that the Council didn't know existed. Ships that were supposed to be on training exercises quietly moved to strategic positions. Colonies received coded instructions to prepare defenses. Manufacturing facilities switched to military production. If the Council expected humanity to roll over and accept slavery, they were in for a surprise. Back on the Soul's Hope, the team debated what to do. Some argued for turning back immediately. Others said they should continue and try to negotiate. Minho listened to all of them, but he knew the truth. They had to see this through. "If we run now, we confirm everything the Council thinks about us," Minho said. "That we're primitives who can't follow rules. That we're not worthy of respect. We have to show them that humanity deserves to be treated as equals, even if they've already decided otherwise?" asked Taiyang. "Especially then." On the 18th day of their journey, they saw the convergent sphere for the first time. It appeared on their screens as a massive structure that grew larger and larger as they approached. It was the size of a small moon, covered in lights and docking ports. Ships of every imaginable design came and went constantly. Veltharax returned to the conference room. "We will arrive in 6 hours. You will be given quarters to rest and prepare. Tomorrow, you will appear before the Council. I suggest you practice proper submission gestures." After it left, Ora checked the room for listening devices. She found 3. The Council had been spying on them the entire journey. "They know everything we've discussed," Ora said grimly. "Good. said Minho. "Then they know we're not afraid of them." That was a lie. Minho was terrified. He was about to walk into a room with beings who saw humanity as nothing more than useful animals to be controlled. He would have to convince them that humans deserved freedom. And if he failed, his species might face extinction. The Soul's hope docked at the convergence sphere. As Minho and his team prepared to disembark, they didn't know they were walking into a trap that had been set the moment humanity first reached the stars. Behind them, traveling through space at maximum speed, Captain Ji-woo commanded a fleet of warships. They wouldn't arrive for days. But if Ambassador Lee sent the signal, they would come ready for war. The interior of the convergence sphere was like nothing humans had ever seen. Corridors stretched in impossible directions. Gravity shifted without warning. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the halls, most of them ignoring the human delegation completely. Ambassador Minho Lee and his team were given quarters in what Vil-Therax called the supplicant section. The rooms were small and uncomfortable, clearly designed to remind visitors of their low status. They had 12 hours before their appearance, before the Council. Engineer Sujin Yoon was part of the delegation because she understood systems and technology better than anyone else. While the others rested, she explored their assigned area. What she found troubled her. The environmental. Controls are separate from the main station. Systems, she told Security Chief Bora Kim. Our entire section can be isolated or vented into space with the press of a button. They built in an execution chamber, Bora said flatly. They've done this before. Minho spent the night writing messages to his family. He didn't expect to send them. But if something happened to him, he wanted them to know his last thoughts. He wrote about how proud he was to represent humanity. He wrote about his hope that they would find their place among the stars. He didn't write about his fear. The summons came early. Guards that looked like they were made of living metal escorted the human delegation through endless corridors. They passed chambers where other species were conducting business. Minho noticed that some aliens bowed or stepped aside when others passed. The hierarchy Vil-Therax had described was visible everywhere. The council chamber was massive. The ceiling stretched up so far that Minho couldn't see the top. 12 enormous thrones formed a circle around a central platform. Each throne held one of the council members. Minho recognized the crystalline being from his first contact. The others were just as alien. One looked like it was made of smoke. Another resembled a living plant. A third seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. These were the rulers of the galaxy. "Approach," commanded a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Minho and his team walked to the central platform. They stood alone in that vast chamber while thousands of aliens watched from galleries above. This was meant to be a show, a demonstration of council power. The being on the central throne spoke. Its body was covered in what looked like insect chitin, and it had too many limbs to count. The translator identified it as Counselor Praxthorn. "You are here to answer for the crimes of the species called humanity. You have violated territorial boundaries. You have claimed worlds that were not yours to claim. You have ignored the proper order of galactic civilization. How do you answer these charges?" Minho took a deep breath. "With respect to the Council, we were not aware of any boundaries or laws. We received no communications. We saw no signs of intelligent life in the systems we explored." "Ignorance is not innocence," Praxthorn replied. "The law exists whether you know it or not. Your species has taken what belongs to the Council. This cannot stand." "Then tell us how to make it right," Minho said. "We're willing to negotiate borders. We can relocate colonists. We want peace. Peace requires order. Order requires submission. These are the terms. Your species will abandon all colonies beyond your home system. You will surrender your military vessels to Council authority. You will accept a period of service under Council guidance. How long is this service period? Asked Minho, though he already knew the answer would be bad. 500 years. The words echoed through the chamber. 500 years. 20 generations of humans serving as slaves to the Council. That's unacceptable, Minho said firmly. Humanity is a sovereign species. We have the right to exist as free people. You have the right to exist as we allow, Praxthorn corrected. You are young. You are weak. You are fortunate that we offer you any choice at all. Minho felt anger rising in his chest. He thought about all of human history. All the wars fought for freedom. All the people who had died rather than submit to tyrants. He thought about his children and whether they deserved to be born into slavery. Then we refuse your terms, Minho said quietly. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens in the galleries made sounds of shock and anger. The council members shifted in their thrones. Praxthorn leaned forward. You refuse? We refuse. Humanity will not accept slavery. Not for 500 years. Not for 500 days. Not ever. Then you choose extinction, Praxthorn said coldly. So be it. What happened next would be remembered throughout galactic history. Praxthorn activated something on its throne. The platform beneath the human delegation began to glow. Minho realized too late what was happening. This was the execution device. They had been standing on it the entire time. Bora, now! Minho shouted .security. Chief Bora Kim had suspected something like this might happen. She and her team had prepared for the worst. As the platform activated, they moved. Weapons that had been disguised as diplomatic equipment came out. The humans opened fire on the execution device's control systems. Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Guards rushed toward the platform. Aliens in the galleries screamed and fled. The humans fought like cornered animals, because that's exactly what they were. Minho felt heat building beneath his feet. The execution device was still working despite the damage. He pulled out a small transmitter that Bora had given him. One button. One signal. He pressed it. Far away in space, Captain Ji Woo received the signal on his fleet command ship. His blood ran cold. The ambassador was calling for help. That meant the worst had happened. All ships, engage maximum speed. Plot course for the convergence sphere. Load all weapons, Ji Woo ordered. Humanity is at war. Back in the council chamber, the execution device completed its cycle. Energy erupted from the platform. Bora's team managed to pull most of the delegation clear, but not everyone made it. Ambassador Minho Lee was caught in the blast. He fell to the floor, his body burned and broken. Around him, his team fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. He knew they wouldn't survive, but that didn't matter anymore. The signal had been sent. Earth knew what the Council had tried to do. With his last strength, Minho activated his personal recorder. The device was broadcasting everything to every news network in Council space and beyond. Let the galaxy see what happened to those who refused to kneel. We came in peace, Minho whispered into the recorder. We asked for nothing but respect. But if you will not grant us peace, then you will learn what humans are truly capable of. We will not kneel. We will never kneel. Ambassador Minho Lee died on the floor of the council chamber. Around him, his security team fought until they were overwhelmed. 15 humans died that day, but their deaths were not meaningless. The broadcast of the execution spread across the galaxy faster than light. Billions of beings watched as the council murdered a delegation that came in peace. Some were horrified. Others were pleased that upstart humans had been put in their place. But everyone understood one thing. Humanity and the Council were now at war. On Earth, Admiral Dayon Kong watched the broadcast and felt tears run down his face. Then he wiped them away and turned to his command staff. "Mobilize everything," he ordered. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. The Council wanted to teach us a lesson. We're going to teach them one instead." The Galactic Council expected the war to last 3 months at most. They had vastly superior numbers, better technology, and 10,000 years of experience. Humanity had passion and anger. The Council thought that would not be enough. They were wrong. Admiral Dayon Kong stood in the command center beneath Seoul and looked at the tactical displays. Red markers showed Council fleets moving toward human colonies. Blue markers showed human forces preparing to meet them. The odds were terrible. The Council had 3 ships for every 1 human vessel. "They're following predictable patterns," said Commander Young Seo-on, who had been studying the Council's military doctrine. "They've been fighting the same way for thousands of years." They announce their arrival. They offer surrender terms. They wait for a response. Only then do they attack. Because they see war as a formal process, Dayon realized. They have rules. And we don't, Young Seo finished grimly. Humanity's first response shocked the galaxy. When a Council fleet arrived at the colony world of New Bizan, they broadcast their standard surrender demand. They received no response. Instead, human ships appeared behind them using jump coordinates that should have been impossible to calculate. The human fleet didn't ask for surrender. They didn't broadcast warnings. They opened fire immediately on the Council ships' engines and life support. When Council ships tried to retreat, human vessels followed them through jump space and destroyed them one by one. The Council fleet commander survived long enough to broadcast a horrified message. They fight like animals. That battle set the pattern for what followed. The Council expected formal warfare with clear rules. Humanity gave them total war. Captain Ji Woo Park commanded a strike force that specialized in what the Council called dishonorful tactics. Ji Woo called it winning. His ships would paint themselves to look like civilian vessels. When Council patrols approached to escort them, Ji Woo's people would activate hidden weapons and destroy the surprised Council ships at point-blank range. "They keep falling for it," said Lieutenant Kyung-gi in disbelief after their 8th successful ambush. "Because lying in war is unthinkable to them," Ji-woo explained. "They have 10,000 years of tradition that says you don't deceive your enemy. We don't have that tradition. We have a tradition that says you do whatever it takes to win." Dr. Hai-Jin Choi had been a xenobiologist who studied alien life. Now she led a team developing biological weapons. The Council species had evolved on different worlds with different chemistry. What was harmless to humans could be deadly to them. "I never thought I'd do this," Hai-Jin said quietly as she approved the release of a virus that would devastate Council supply depots. Create diseases to kill intelligent beings. They murdered Ambassador Lee, her assistant reminded her. They declared war on our entire species. "We didn't ask for this." "No, we didn't," Hai-Jin agreed. "But we'll finish it." The Council War Master Kroth, Nar was a being that had commanded fleets for 3 centuries. It had won countless battles and conquered dozens of systems. But it had never faced an enemy like humanity. "They don't follow any military protocols," Krofnar complained to the Council. "They attack supply lines instead of military targets. They use weapons that cause unnecessary suffering. They refuse to accept surrender. They're barbarians." "Then crush them," ordered Counselor Prax Thorn. "You have superior forces. Use them." But using superior forces required finding the enemy first. Human fleets refused to meet Council forces in open battle. They would hit supply convoys, and disappear. They would raid isolated stations and vanish before reinforcements arrived. They fought 100 small battles instead of one large one. And slowly, the council began to bleed. 3 months into the war, Admiral Dayon executed his most ambitious plan. The council's strategy relied on a massive supply depot at the Nexus Gate, a strategic jump point that connected dozens of systems. The depot was defended by a dreadnought the size of a small city and a fleet of over 100 warships. Dayon attacked it with everything he had. 50 human ships jumped in at once, coming from 10 different directions. The council fleet scrambled to respond, expecting a traditional battle. Instead, the human ships scattered. They targeted civilian transports and supply vessels. They spread mines throughout the system. They created such chaos that the council's numerical advantage meant nothing because they couldn't coordinate their forces. Then Dayon did something the council thought was insane. He ordered 20 ships to perform suicide runs directly at the dreadnought. The ships were loaded with nuclear weapons and piloted by volunteers who knew they wouldn't survive. The explosions tore through the dreadnought's shields. The massive vessel, damaged and vulnerable, tried to retreat. But Captain Jiwoo's strike force had been waiting for that moment. They had captured council shuttles in previous battles. Now those shuttles, piloted by humans wearing stolen council uniforms, requested emergency docking with the crippled dreadnought. The dreadnought let them in. What followed was brutal close-quarters combat. Humans in boarding parties fought through the dreadnought's corridors. The council crew had never trained for repelling boarders. Why would they? Who would be crazy enough to board an enemy ship during battle? Humans would. The dreadnought fell. Its loss was both strategic and symbolic. If humanity could destroy the council's most powerful warship, what else could they do? The war reached a turning point at the Battle of Hanyang System. A massive council fleet cornered 3 human colonies. The evacuation wasn't complete. Millions of civilians were still on the planets. The council offered surrender terms. Submit now, and the civilians would be spared. Commander Young Seo-an commanded the defense fleet. She had 30 ships against 300. The smart play was to retreat and save the fleet. But that would doom the civilians. Young Seo made a different choice. All ships were not running, she broadcast to her fleet. Those are our people down there. Our families. Our children. The council thinks we'll sacrifice them to save ourselves. They're wrong. The human fleet attacked. They used every dirty trick they had learned. They detonated nuclear weapons inside their own ships to create radiation zones that council sensors couldn't penetrate. They hid in the debris and struck from ambush. They fired missiles that split into hundreds of smaller warheads that overwhelmed council defenses. They lost 25 ships, but they destroyed or disabled over 100 council vessels. The remaining council fleet withdrew, shocked by the ferocity of the defense. The evacuations completed. Every civilian got off those worlds safely. The price was paid in the blood of the crews who stayed to defend them. News of these battles spread throughout council space. Some council species began to question the war. Why were they fighting humans? Because they had settled some empty worlds? Was that worth this cost? 4 council member species publicly declared neutrality. 3 others privately began reaching out to human diplomats to discuss peace terms. Council leadership saw its alliance crumbling. Councillor Praxthorn called for even more aggressive action. But War Master Krathner privately began to doubt victory was possible. They fight like demons, Krathner said to its second-in-command. Every battle costs us more than we can afford to lose. They don't care about casualties. They don't care about their own survival. They only care about winning. Then what do we do? Asked the second. We pray they're willing to negotiate. Because if this continues, Both sides will bleed until there's nothing left. The war ended not with a dramatic final battle, but with exhaustion on both sides. 6 months after Ambassador Minho Lee's death, representatives from both humanity and the Council met on a neutral station to discuss terms. President Yunji. Nam represented Earth. She was 55 years old and had been elected 3 months into the war when the previous president suffered a heart attack from the stress. She had campaigned on a platform of peace, but she would not accept peace at any price. Across the table sat former Councilor Selmara, one of the moderate council members who had argued against the war from the beginning. Selmara's species resembled tall, thin birds with feathers that changed color with their emotions. Right now, those feathers showed exhaustion and sadness. "We lost 23 million people," Yunji said quietly. 23 million humans who died because your council couldn't accept that we had the right to exist freely. "And we lost billions," Selmara replied. "Not just military casualties. Entire species have suffered because of this war. The council, as it existed, is broken. The question is what comes next." Admiral Dae-Yoon Kang sat beside President Nam. He had aged visibly during the war. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines on his face that hadn't been there before. He had sent thousands of people to their deaths. Those deaths haunted him. "What comes next is that this never happens again," Dayan said firmly. "No more slavery disguised as service. No more executing ambassadors who refuse to kneel. The old council is dead. Good riddance." "Some of my people want to continue fighting," Selmara admitted. "They believe humanity should be punished for your methods of warfare. The biological weapons, the suicide attacks, the refusal to honor any rules of engagement." Captain Ji-Woo Park was also at the negotiations. He had been promoted to admiral during the war and now commanded Earth's largest battle fleet. He leaned forward. "We fought the way we had to fight to survive," Ji-Woo said. "If the council had treated us with respect from the beginning, none of this would have happened. You want to talk about honor? You murdered a peace delegation. Everything that followed is on you." The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. Both sides had demands. Both sides had to compromise. Slowly, a new structure emerged. The Galactic Council, as it had existed, would be dissolved. In its place would be the Galactic Assembly. Every species would have one vote regardless of how long they had been in space. Decisions would require a majority. Not the decree of 12 ancient species. Territorial disputes would be resolved through arbitration, not war. Species could govern themselves as they saw fit. No more slavery. No more forced service periods. The hardest part was deciding what to do with the leadership of the old council. Councilor Praxthorn and 5 others had ordered the attack on the human delegation. Humanity wanted them tried for war crimes. Many council species wanted them pardoned to avoid further conflict. The compromise was exile. The 6 councilors who had ordered the execution were stripped of their positions and banned from holding office. They would live out their lives in isolation, watching the civilization they had built crumble. Dr. Hai Jin Choi spent the months after the war working with alien scientists to undo the damage her biological weapons had caused. It was painful work. She saw the suffering her creations had inflicted. She saved as many as she could, but it wasn't enough to wash away the guilt. "I became a monster to fight monsters," she told Admiral Ji-Woo one night. "You became what you needed to become to save our species," Ji-Woo replied. "Don't forget that. If we had lost, humanity would have been enslaved or exterminated. You helped prevent that. Does that make it right? I don't know, but it makes it necessary." The first session of the Galactic Assembly took place 1 year after the war ended. Delegates from over 200 species gathered in a new station built specifically for the assembly. It was smaller than the old convergence sphere, but designed to make every species feel equal. President Yoonji Nam gave the opening address. Behind her stood a holographic image of Ambassador Min-ho Lee. This man came to the council in peace. He asked for nothing but respect and the right for his species to exist as free beings. For that request, he was murdered. 23 million humans died in the war that followed. Billions of other beings died. All of that suffering happened because the old council could not accept that might does not make right. Yoonji paused and looked around at the assembled delegates. We are here today because the old order failed. It failed to bring true peace. It failed to treat all species with dignity. It failed to adapt to a changing galaxy. We have a chance now to build something better. Not a council of elders dictating to the young, but an assembly of equals working together. She gestured to the hologram of Min-ho Lee. Before he died, Ambassador Lee said, "We will not kneel." That remains true. Humanity will not kneel to anyone, but we are willing to stand beside anyone who treats us with respect. We are willing to work with anyone who believes in freedom and dignity for all beings. That is the foundation of this new assembly. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then Selmara stood and began to clap. Other delegates joined in. Not everyone applauded. Some species still harbored resentment, but enough did that it felt like a beginning. Admiral Daeyeon Kong retired from military service 6 months later. He had done his duty, but he was tired. He spent his remaining years writing a history of the war. The book's dedication was simple: to the 23 million who died so that humanity could remain free. Captain Ji-woo Park remained in the military, but focused on peacekeeping rather than warfare. He led joint human-alien operations to protect new species from the pirates and warlords that had emerged during the war's chaos. Commander Young Seo An became the first human member of the Assembly's peacekeeping command. She helped develop the protocols that would prevent future wars and ensure that disputes were resolved peacefully. Dr. Hai-jin Choi made first contact with 3 new species over the next decade. Each time, she approached with respect and genuine curiosity. She taught a new generation of xenobiologists to see aliens not as potential enemies, but as fellow travelers through the cosmos. The old council chamber was preserved as a museum. Visitors could walk through it and see where Ambassador Lee had made his last stand. A plaque was installed at the spot where he fell. It read, "Here ended tyranny. Here began equality. May we never forget the price of both." 20 years after the war, President Nam attended a ceremony at the museum. She was old now, her time in office long past. But she came every year on this day to remember. A young human approached her. The girl couldn't have been more than 12 years old. "Are you President Nam?" the girl asked. "I used to be," Yoonji replied with a smile. "My teacher says you helped end the war. She says you built the assembly. A lot of people built the assembly. I just helped with the foundation. Why did we fight? Couldn't we have just talked to them?" Yoonji knelt down so she was at eye level with the girl. "We tried to talk. But sometimes people in power don't want to listen. They think being stronger gives them the right to rule over others. We had to show them they were wrong. Did a lot of people die? Yes, too many. Was it worth it?" Yoonji thought about Ambassador Lei, about the 23 million humans who never came home, about the billions of aliens who died in a war they never asked for. She thought about the assembly and the peace it had brought. She thought about young girls who could grow up free. "I hope so," she said finally. "Every day I hope it was worth it." The girl nodded solemnly and ran off to rejoin her school group. Yoonji watched her go and felt a weight in her chest that the galaxy was at peace now. New species joined the assembly every year. The horrors of the old council system were being dismantled piece by piece. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges happened. Humans and aliens worked together on projects that would have been impossible before. But peace had been bought with blood. Human blood. Alien blood. The blood of millions who had wanted nothing but to live their lives. EUNG stood in that museum for a long time, remembering everyone who had been lost. The price of freedom had been steep, but looking at that young girl running freely through the galaxy, Yunji decided it had been a price worth paying. The day humanity arrived at the galaxy, Council with blood had changed everything. From that blood had grown something new, something better. And if the cost of that better future sometimes kept Yunji awake at night, well, that was a burden she was willing to carry. The galaxy had learned that humanity would not kneel. And in learning that lesson, it had become a place where no one needed to kneel ever again.